Hello and welcome back. This is Isaac and you're watching ACT Reading Prep. Now we've come far now and we only have a couple more of the practice tests that are left with our book. And like I promised, after that we're going to take a look at one other practice test so you can be exposed to a lot more of these different types of passages. So what we're going to do today would be, well, about similar but a little bit different from what we've been doing so far. Now what we've been doing so far was to break down the different passages into the different types, and then we looked into how you're supposed to understand the passages and how you're supposed to find the necessary parts within the passages and answer the questions. And we were just doing the questions and solutions and questions and solutions. Now of course, remember this is a test and there's always strategies that are involved in taking tests. And so what we're going to take a look at today is most notably, we're going to take a look at the test strategies that you might employ to get a better grades or to get a higher grades in the ACT testing. Now, we are going to take a look at the several pages today. So I haven't really notified any pages, but those passages that we haven't read yet. So they are going to be in order: the prose fiction, the social sciences, the humanities, and the natural sciences. So please look at them as we go along, all right? And one thing for sure is that we're going to try to pick up the speed. The time criticalness of the test is very important, and so we are going to take a look at it and focus on it, all right? So before we move into the passage themselves, let's take a look at some of the things that you really need to look into. All right, so I'm just going to write it here. So the first thing that you need to look into would be the time criticalness. Everything about this test is very time critical, especially the reading. You are given only 35 minutes for 40 questions, all right, which will roughly come down to 8.5 minutes, all right, 8.5 minutes per passage. What that means is that you can only spend 8.5 minutes on a passage and 10 questions. If you go beyond that, you'll start to have problems, because that will already be 34 minutes, and you only have a minute after the 8.5 minutes per passages, and you'll only get a minute left. And that minute is very important, because what you do in that minute is you're going to go back and try to look into all the possible little mistakes that you've made. All right. So remember, it's only 8.5 minutes per passage. So how are you going to handle this? How are you going to tackle this problem? The time criticalness of it, right? Okay, that's the first thing that we're going to take a look at, the time critical manner of the testing itself. The next thing that we're going to take a look at is, well, necessarily it's not the something that you should already know. It's something that you already have the answers to. Now the second thing is the accuracy. Okay, so the accuracy is very important. What do we mean by accuracy? Now accuracy is how acute you can be on one of these questions. All right. So if you remember, you have 40 questions, right? When you have 40 questions, what happens with the conversion table is that the raw scores that you get, let's say the raw scores, because it's 40 questions, let's say the raw score you get is 40 to 39, then you probably get 36 composite scores, right? But if you get like 38 to 37, the composite score suddenly drops very much. Usually it doesn't even involve 37, it only involves 38, and then you go down to 35. And then from 37 to 36, the considerable drop in it is just imminent. Okay, so let's say if you miss 4 or 5 questions, then your score is already down to like 30 or 31. Okay, 4 or 5 questions wrong. Now out of 40, that's not that bad, but in the composite score, it's real bad, right? So the accuracy part of it, that's what we want to really focus on. You need to be really accurate about what you choose as an answer and what you figure out as the answer should be within the passages, all right? So the accuracy part of it is very important. So time criticalness and the accuracy part of it. And then the third part that we're going to take a look at would be, sorry, that was erased, but don't worry. And the third thing that we're going to take a look at would be the order in which you in which you're finding or in which you're solving the questions for the passages. Now remember, the orders are from prose fiction to social sciences to humanities and to the natural sciences, right? That's the order in which the actual test is proposing to you to solve it in a manner. But of course, if you've taken the test already, you can go back and forth in between that section of reading. Okay, like the third section, the reading test, you can go back to natural sciences, you can come back to social sciences or whatever. So that shouldn't be a problem. So what you need to do is you need to set up your priorities, right? I mean, everybody can't be, well, you know, those of you who are really good at reading, I'm pretty sure you can do, you know, you can do this with no problem at all. You can start with prose fiction, the social sciences, humanities, and natural sciences. That shouldn't be a problem. But for those of you who have trouble reading some of the contents in the passages, for example, let's say you're not so, you know, keen to natural sciences. Now, it's only necessary, it's only natural that you put natural sciences at the very end, right? I mean, you know that you're not going to do well on that anyway, so let's just focus our attention on these three and then go into the natural sciences when we have the time. And of course, if you don't have the time, the fourth one that we're going to take a look at would be the guessing, right? Now remember, guessing, I would say, like, you know, guessing as in you choosing your answer without, you know, further thinking or further reasoning, right? I mean, yes, it could be done, yes, because I mean, like I said in the beginning or in the order, right? If you're not so keen to the natural sciences, I mean, there's no reason for you to spend, you know, like agonizing minutes in the natural sciences, but rather use those minutes wisely into the, right, different other sections, right? So natural sciences, let's say you come to it, but guessing is, you know, like guessing the answers to the questions is not so productive, right? I wouldn't recommend that you do this because, well, first of all, remember, unlike the SATs, right, you're not getting deductions, right? There's no deduction for the points that you get wrong. So for example, in the SATs, you get deductions, 0.5 scores off of whatever you get wrong, right? I mean, you know, deduction seems quite bad, but in ACT, yes, there are no deductions, but it's still bad because if you think about it, let's just say that you get perfect scores in prose fiction, perfect scores in social sciences, and perfect scores in humanities, all right? You've got that perfectly, but you've spent too much time, and so you don't have time for natural sciences, and you suck at it anyway, okay? You suck at it anyway, and you don't have the time to solve it, so you guessed it, right? That's 10 questions, all right? So halfway along, let's put it this way, yet better, right? So you went halfway, and you got 5 of them right. Okay, so far you've got 35 right, and you have 5 more left, and you don't have the time. You're running out of time. You have like 1 minute to do this. So you decided to guess all that and put all B's, all right? B's for everything. So B's as in B's and G's and B's and G's for everything, okay? Now, that seems the right thing to do, but it's not really the right thing to do because if you think about it, if you remember the conversion score tables, right? So let's say 40 to 39 and 38, 37 to 36 and so on and on and on and 35, right? So if you get 35, right, if you missed all of these guessing scores, if you missed all of it, right, if you get that, then your score will drop down considerably, like 6 points in the composite way, of course, 6 to 5 points. Now, I wouldn't recommend you do this, right? So what you need to do is if you don't have the time, right, guessing is, yes, I mean, it's sort of required for you to do because, I mean, you know, it's better to put something than not putting anything. But don't choose one answer straight, all right? Because I've seen many of these cases. I mean, yes, some patterns do go that way, right? If you choose one answer straight away, it will give you that better, or it will yield you a better score. But most of the times it won't do that, right? So what you need to do is you need to quickly skim through the question, the answer choices, and try to choose the one that really sticks to, right? Sticks to the natural science passages. That way you can increase your chance of getting that question right. And if you get that right, then you get a considerably higher scores. Remember, one question would make all the difference, okay? So make sure that you do guess, but don't guess in a stupid way and putting B all together or C all together, right? But try to guess it according to the passage, right? Read only the answer choices and choose the one that sticks to the passage. or not stick to the passage. Try to find the pattern quickly. Okay, you can do this in maybe a minute time or 30 seconds time. All right, don't just choose just because you don't have the time. All right. Okay, good. So these are the 4 significant things that you need to look into when we are talking about test strategies. All right. So remember, time criticalness is the most important thing, and so that's what we're going to take a look at today. Now, what we wanted to do initially was to give you some time, like timeline as we do the passages. But remember, the way we are doing the passages is quite simple, and it takes no longer than, say, 3 minutes to read the passages. Trust me, that's what happens. All right. So take a look at how that's happening, and take a look at if that is actually necessarily or the case. All right. Okay. So let's take a look at the passage. The first passage. Now, of course, me as a test taker, I'll start with prose fiction because prose fiction is something of not my field, but I would say it's something that is comfortable for me, right? So that's what I'm going to start with. Of course, I'm comfortable with natural sciences as well, every one of these topics, but because I'm going to start with prose fiction. Now, if you're not, then you can probably start with social sciences or humanities and natural sciences. It depends on how you want to do it. Now, many students prefer not to look into the prose fiction right away because prose fiction seem to be quite difficult, right? So they start with natural sciences, or they start backwards, or they start with backwards, or they can start with social sciences and humanities and natural sciences and come back to prose fiction. I mean, either way, fine, right? Order is very important. You need to create that order, right? If you're that kind of person, if you're an orderly person, then you might want to start with prose fiction. But if that doesn't affect you anyhow, right, like changing and shifting the orders of different things doesn't really affect you, then you should go back to you should go forward to one of the passages that you're very familiar with, and then come back to the passages that you're not so familiar with, right? Okay, so remember that. All right, let's get started. I will be measuring a little bit of time because what we are going to do is we're going to work on the timeline, or at least the time criticalness of this test, right? If we move on to the next passage, the passage 1, of course, is a prose fiction, and of course, this is not what the real passage looks like, right? I mean, you all know that this is not the real, test paper looked like. So the test paper actually, of course, because the passages are quite long, you'll have on one side the entire passage and maybe a question here and there, right? And then you'll have all the questions, all the 10 questions within that way, right? So therefore, what you need to do is it depends on how you want to do it. Now, what I usually do, what I would do as a student would be, I would go straight into the passage itself. But some of the students feel comfortable looking at the questions first of all, right? I mean, it's your choice. However you want to do it, you should do it. But I would say go to the passage first of all, because looking at the questions without knowing the passage is just redundancy, right? You'd have to look at it again. Now remember, I've been constantly telling you that human memory is quite short. Human short memories are quite short, and you won't just remember everything that you read, right? So there's the problem. So there's always that repetition. You have to repeat yourself over and over again to make sure that knowledge or that thought enters your brain and then stays there, right? So remember that. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do is to read this. Now, we'll try to measure this, okay? We'll start at a certain time. I have a clock in front of me, and let's see, you have your clock in front of you, and let's see if we can do this, understanding of this in less than 2 minutes time, all right? 2 or 3 minutes time, all right? So let's get started. I have the clock in front of me. Let's get started right now, right? So it says this passage is that from the novel The Fisher King by Paul Marshall. So Fisher King, we don't know what that is, but let's try to go on, all right? It was nearing the end of the second set, the jazz show winding down, when Haiti heard Abe Kaiser at the microphone call Everett Payne's name. So apparently we have several names such as Haiti, and we have Abe Kaiser, and then we have Everett Payne's, okay? So this is something like a jazz show right now, jazz. And then they sometimes even got to choose the tune they wanted to play. I don't know who they are, but they got to choose, which tune to play. And then the second paragraph, this Sunday, Everett Payne, not long out of the army, was the one being invited to sit in. So I guess this guy, Everett Payne, who just was discharged from the army, and he was invited to sit in and listen to the songs, or to sit in to play with them, or whichever it is, okay? So Everett Payne, I guess, is the main character. All right, moving on. Breath held. Haiti watched him separate himself from the hopefuls and approach to the stand, taking his time, moving with what almost seemed a deliberate pause between each step. So you're explaining how he was getting onto the stage, right? That's a minute past, people. That was his way, Haiti knew. So that was his way, as in he was a strange person in a way that he had his own approaches. You know, he had his own sort of like a feel to it, right? And then she watched now as he slowly mounted the bandstand and conferred with the bassist and drummer. Those two were all he would need. So he would confer, meaning he would talk with his bassist and drummer, and they're trying to figure out the tunes and whatnots, right? And then it says Sonny Boy Blue, that honky doc June, right? So tune, I'm sorry. So Sonny Boy Blue is the one that they're gonna play. And then around her, the purists looked askance at each other from behind their regulation shades and slouched deeper in their chairs in open disgust. I guess the purists we're talking about is those people who are very much into this pure sort of form of jazz, right? And then at first, Hockey, though it was, he played the song straight through as written, the rather long introduction, verse and chorus. So it was an interesting music. It was very Hockey music, as in it was very exciting music, but he played it as it was. And then quickly taking their cue from him, the bassist reached for his bow and then the drummer for his brushes. The two of them also treating the original as if they were a serious piece of music, right? You get that idea. And then Everett Payne took his time paying his respects to the tune as written, and once that was done, he hunched closer to the piano, angled his head sharply to the left, completely closed the curtain of his gaze, meaning closed his eyes, and with his hands commanding the length and breadth of the keyboard, he unleashed the dazzling pyrotechnic, very flashy of chords, right? Polyrhythms, seemingly unrelated harmonies and ideas, and fresh and brash, outrageous ideas. So he was going crazy now. A collective insuck of breath throughout the club, meaning everybody was holding their breath, right? And then moving on, where Haiti wondered, did he come by the dazzling array of ideas and wealth of feelings, right? So she was wondering where he gets all these ideas and all these feelings. Again and again, he took them on a joyous, terrifying, cold roller coaster of the ride, it seemed to Haiti. And when he finally deposited them on the terra firma, after close to the 20 minutes, everyone in Putnam Royal could only sit there if they were in church and weren't supposed to clap. So they were in awe, right? And then Alvin brought everyone up with him. So Alvin brought up everyone. I don't know who Alvin is, but Alvin brought up everyone with him, right? So that was it. Now that took me at exactly somewhere around 3.5 minutes. Now that's because I was trying to explain to you what was happening within the passage, right? I was reading it out loud and I was trying to convey to you what these passages mean. So therefore, I could definitely say, I can safely say that I've done this, or at least if you were to just read it, it would probably have taken you 3 minutes or 2.5 minutes, right? I'm looking at the clock right now. So remember, 2.5 minutes would be the best timing, because remember, you have 8.5 minutes, right? 8.5 minutes. Okay, so I'll just put it as 8.5 minutes, meaning that you've spent 2 minutes out of this, right? 2.5 minutes out of this, right? You still have 6 minutes to go. Now, 6 minutes should be good enough to solve all the questions, because of course it's 1 to 10, right? But trust me, you won't spend, let's say you won't spend a minute in every one of these questions. You won't use a minute for a single question. You will use less than a minute for a single question sometimes, and you will use a little bit more than a minute in a single question, right? So remember how to approach this in a time critical manner, all right? It's very important. All right, so we've looked at it, and I'm hoping that you've kind of understood, right? You understood the overall picture of what the passage looks like, right? So I mean, if I may tell you, if you already may have something in your head, there was this, you knew the name of the club as well. It's called the Putnam Valley Club, right? I think so. We read it somewhere in the middle, because it says, where was it? I think it was somewhere here in the middle. I remember this, right? Putnam, like a club. I mean, if you read that, I think it's right here. Putnam Royal could only sit there, and if they were in the church and weren't supposed to clap. So this is a Putnam Royal Club where they play jazz, right? They have this jazz shows, and this is Sunday, and this Sunday, Everett Payne, who's just discharged out of the army, is sitting in with them as one of those, like joint session men, right? He would just come in as a visitor, as a guest, right? He would play, and so that's what was happening. But then again, the scene was that there are purists who think that jazz should be what jazz is supposed to be like. Like purists meaning, those who are pure, those who are clean, right? They don't want to take in any other types of, but they want to only take in the purest form of jazz. And of course, this Ever Payne or Ever Payne character is at first trying to play it as it was, right? Play it as the song was written, so that it kind of like paying respect to the music itself, right? But the problem was that these purists, of course, around her, the purists looked askance at each other from behind their regulation shades and slouched deeper in their chairs in open disgust. So I guess they know, right? Sonny Boy Blue, the music itself is very much of a disgusting music to the purists, because it sort of it gets out of the boundaries of the real jazz, or at least the pure jazz, right? So they started to play, and they were very disgusted by this. And then, of course, at first he played a song straight through as the song was written. So the song, as the original song was written, he was just going to play that way. And of course, the bassist and everybody else were doing the same thing. But then, as soon as the cue was done, as in like, let's say a verse was done, or at least like 16. Let's say 16 bars of music was done, and then he would suddenly change. What he would do, he would slouch to the piano, right? He was actually hunched back or hunched closer to the piano, angle his head sharply, right? Those people who are, when they are focusing on something, they angle their head quickly, or angle their head little to the left, a little to the right, as if your brain has to work that way. And then to the left, completely close the curtain of his gaze, meaning he closes completely he completely closes his eyes, and then he started playing like crazy, like pyrotechnics or it's the pyrotechnics. Pyrotechnics is the fireworks, right? Fireworks are something that is very exciting. So excitement of chords and polyrhythms and seemingly unrelated harmonies. So he would play this improvisational way, like I don't know if you're aware of the jazz genres or genre of jazz. Like they have I'm not so sure, but there are bebop jazz. There are there's a conservative jazz, I guess, as opposed to the liberal jazz. All right. So there are different techniques that they use. Some of them go from. Jazz is all about syncopation. Syncopation is the using of different harmonies, and sometimes these harmonies do work, as opposed to sometimes these harmonies don't work. And even if those harmonies seem a little bit off, they still would use it because that was just form of a music for them, right? So therefore, that's the idea. And then everybody was holding their breath, and then of course she wondered, Haiti is another character, I guess. She wondered where he gets all these ideas from, and I'm pretty sure this would be, explaining everything on that. And then of course they took him to a joyous ride, and everybody was enjoying this, right? Terrifying roller coaster. And then Elvin brought everyone up with him. I don't know who Elvin is and what he does, but he brought up everyone with him. I'm pretty sure this wouldn't be too important, right? So anyways, that's the idea. I'm hoping you got this off in about 2.5 minutes. I'm hoping that you did, and we certainly try to do this in a very fast manner, right? Although I was reading it out loud, if you were to read it, you wouldn't take more than 2 minutes, all right? Okay, now let's move on to the question. Like I said, the question itself shouldn't take you that long. So what we want to do is, let's see if we can solve this question without taking too much time. All right, I'm looking at my clock again, so let's take a look at this in under a minute time. Let's get started. It can reasonably infer from the passage that Shades Owen. So what you need to do is you need to find Shades Owen. Now of course we have to go back and forth with this, right? So we'll take time, but for you, of course, this will be right on your left side and your questions will be right side, so it should be easier, right? So Shades Owen, you need to find them. You can go down a little bit and see Shades Bowen, you find them right there. And so you read that she hadn't seen him join the other local musicians, including Shades Bowen, with tenor sax in what was called the bullpen, which was simply a dozen or so chairs grouped near the bandstand. So Shades Bowen is a local musician, right? So if that's the idea, then what should be your answer? Did not accompany Ever Payne as he played Sonny Boy Blue. Had been in the army with Ever Payne, was the oldest musician in the bullpen, or did not usually allow the local musicians to play with the band. So which are we talking about, right? Of course the answer would be this, because here Shades Bowen is a local I need to explain this, and I'm going back and forth. That only took us about a minute or a minute and a half or so, right? Because of the time display. So if you take a look at it, it says Shades Bone. She hadn't seen him join the other local musicians, including Shades Bone. I don't know who him is, who him she's talking about, but I'm pretty sure that's Everett Payne, right? Because we read that part. We read that part saying Everett name, heard his name, and to her surprise saw him slowly stand up in the bullpen and up front. She hadn't seen him join any other local musicians, including Shades Bone, right, with his tenor sax. And then in what was called the bullpen, which is simply a dozen or so chairs grouped together, right? So if you see that idea, it definitely means that. I mean, if all the other things don't really make sense if you think about it. Hadn't been in the army with Everett Payne. Now, had been in the army with Everett Payne. Now, we don't know that yet because the army part of it appears in the second paragraph, right? I mean, you should already cue this in your head. The army part of it was second right there. So it has got nothing to do with Shades Bone, right? I mean, the second one, if take a look at, was the oldest musician in the bullpen. Don't know that for sure. I don't think we're talking about how old or how whatever, and did not usually allow the local musician to play with the band. He was the local musician. So therefore, the only answer should be A, right? That's the answer. Remember, people, it took you like a minute and a half almost, all right? Let's get with the other one, the second one. Let's see how long that takes. I'm looking at my watch. Let's get started. All right, the main purpose of the statement in line 62 is 2. So let's take a look at 62. Now, of course, I'm saying that it will take time, but right there, 62. Where Haiti wondered, did he come? Oh, I'm sorry. 62 should be right there. They too stood up in the languid praise. I'm sorry. We're taking a collective insuck of breath throughout the club, right? A collective insuck of breath out of the club. So what does that mean? Illustrate the high expectation the audience initially had for Everett Payne's performances, inform the reader of the audience's reaction to Everett Payne's performance, counteract the narrator's description of Everett Payne's performance, provide proof that Everett Payne was a well-known to the audience's. You see the answer right here, right? The answer is G, right there. Because inform the reader of the audience's reaction. That was a reaction to Everett Payne's performance. They were in awe. They were, they were all holding their breath because it was like a roller coaster ride, joyous roller coaster ride. Sometimes terrifying, sometimes very good, right? So that's the answer. It took me like 2 minutes to do this because I was, going back and forth and having little trouble with flicking the different pages. But it should have taken you less than a minute to solve this, right? Because you knew what to look into. You read that part already, line 62, right? So it should register to your head already of what it was like, right? What it was like when they were saying, when the writer wrote this, what did he or what does she mean, right? Okay, let's go to the next. The third one, the same thing. I'll give myself about a minute to do this, and let's see if we can do this, right? So a minute. The passage most strongly suggests that the second set of the jazz show at the club is. So second set of the jazz show. We know that this was a jazz, remember there's a flipping time a little bit. So we know that this was a jazz show, right? Jazz show. Winding down when Haiti near whatever, right? And then you know that somewhere near here, right? So we'll read through a little bit here. It says, the young locals gathered there each Sunday evening, hoping for a chance to perform, because towards the end of the final set, the custom was to invite one or two of them to sit in with the band. They sometimes even got to choose the tune they wanted to play, right? So therefore, definitely a final set. We're talking about a final set here, right? So second set is the final set of the show itself. So if that's the idea, right? The passage most strongly suggests that the second set of the jazz show at the club should be the last one because there's a final set, right? This is the final set, the second set, the final set. I don't think it's the first set. I don't think it's the third set. It's the second set, and that should be the final set of it, right? So that's the answer, the final set. Because, right? I mean, it requires a little bit more of a maybe reading, right? But it says the final set right there, right? It says because towards the end of the final set, the custom was to invite someone, right? And then I guess if you look through it, there should be something that indicating something about his performance here, but I don't think there is anything with the sets or jazz shows or sets or whatsoever, right? That is one of the reasons why your answer should be the final set. The second set should be the final set, all right? Towards the end of the final set, the custom was to invite one or two of them. So after the second set, it's the final set, so that should be your answer, right? Okay, good. The next one, by the way, that took us like a minute and a half because of the flipping part of it, right? The fourth one, let's get started. Which of the following details is used in the passage to indicate how the purists in the audience initially reacted to Everett Payne's choice of music? You already know this. The purists, remember reading that part of it? They were they were disgusted, right? Open disgust. But how did they show that open disgust? The overall silence of the audience, including the purists, the description of the audience's collective insuck of breath, the posture of the purists assumed in their seats, and the fact that the purists stood up. Remember, it's not the overall silence. It's probably the purists were silent, and then it was not the insuck of the breath, because that's how they were showing their awness, right? Awesome, kind of how awesome his music was. The posture the purists assumed in their seats, yes, it was. They were slouched in their seats, deeper in their seats, right? In an open disgust. Not it. The answer should be H, right there. It took you less than a minute just now, right? It took us like 40 seconds to do this. Now, it should take you less than 40 seconds to do this because you already know what you read, right? Where does that come from? Just to make sure that you have the right answer. It says, around their purists looked askance at each other from behind their regulation shades and slouched deeper in their chairs in open disgust, right? They showed how they were disgusted with the music by slouching back into the chair, right? Like this. And then they would like lean back a little, right? That's what we call slouched deeper in their chair, okay? All right, so usually when you do that, it means that you don't really like it. I mean, if you really like something, that you would lean forward, right? To listen to it better, or a little bit get a little bit more comfortable. But these guys were just, lying back or, slouching deeper into the chair in a very open, disgusted manner. All right, that took you less than, remember, 40 seconds. Moving on to the fifth question. According to the narrator, what did Haiti C. Everett Payne do prior to playing Sonny Boy Blue? You know this already too. What did he do? He conferred with the bassist and the drummer, right? He did. You already should have done this. This took me like 20 seconds to do this, right? Why is that? Because take a look at that. We read that part already. You see how the parts that we read is very important? There you go. Quickly, right? There you go. Quickly. Well, that could be one of it, or the other one could be one of it. I mean, either way, it doesn't really matter. Quickly taking their cue from him, the bassist reached for his bow and the drummer for his brushes, and the two of them also treating the original as if they were serious piece of music. Or there was another one, or before anything would start, right? So where would it be? I'm sorry. It's going to take some time. So here you go. She watched now as she slowly mounted the bandstand and conferred with the bassist and the drummer of what they were going to play, and then they said Sonny Boy Blue, right? Prior to playing Sonny Boy Blue, I think they were talking to Everett Payne was talking to the bassist and the drummer to make sure that they were on the same page, right? That took you less than 20 seconds to solve. Remember that. All right, the next one would be number 6. The passage initially portrays the purist most nearly as what? What are the purists like? Knowledgeable and open-minded, snobbish and intolerant, and rational, well-educated, inexperienced, and uninhibited. The answer, of course, is snobbish and intolerant, right? You know this by Everett Payne appearing on the stage and said Sonny Boy Blue, and they were all saying, oh, whatever, we don't want to listen to that, and so they slouched back in their chairs deeper into open disgust. That tells us they're very snobbish, right? They were very looking down on Everett Payne, and then intolerant, and then they weren't able to withstand his music, right? Took you 20 seconds to do this again, right? Remember this. These all can be answered from whatever we've read, not the entire passage, but whatever we read as the most important parts, right? Okay, that took us 20 seconds. Again, 7. It can reasonably be inferred from the passage that Haiti believed Bach and the blues were what? Bach and the blues. So Bach and the blues would be the keyword. Haiti believed, right? So meaning Haiti should be the most important part here. Now remember, this shouldn't take long to do this, but let's see this as one of the important part of it. And also we'll take, we'll probably take this one as the important part of it. Let's see if Bach appears here somewhere, right? This will take you a little bit more than a minute to do, right? It says, what was the source? It has to do, she speculated, listening intently with the way he held his head, angle to the left like that, tilted toward both heaven and earth. His right side, his right ear directed sky upward, hearing up there in the upper room among the stars. Mahalia sang about a new kind of music, a splintered, tonal, profane, and possessing a wonderful dissonance that spoke to him, to his soul case. For him, this was the true music of the spheres, of the maelstrom up there. When at the piano, he kept his right ear tuned in at all times, letting it guide him, inspire him. His other ear, it remained earthbound, trained on the bedrock that for him was like Bach and the blues, right? So therefore, there's the idea, Bach and blues. So what are we saying, right? What are we saying about the Bach and the blues? So it says, its other year, it remained earthbound, trained on the bedrock that for him was Bach and the blues, right? So if that's the idea, what do we mean by that? So what can you infer? Musical influence that Edward Payne tried to avoid representing when he played piano? Or was it foundation of Edward Payne's inventive piano playing? Or is it the true music of the heavens that inspired Edward Payne's creativity as a piano player? Or is it reason why Edward Payne's piano playing abilities limited him to the Tin Pan Alley tunes? Which one of it could be the best answer? It's actually the musical foundation of the Edward Payne's inventive piano playing, right? So Bach and the blues, what are we talking about? Haiti is saying that because his head is tilted to the left a little bit, his right ear was up to the heavens, his left ear is down to earth, right? And that sort of kept in balance. That's what Haiti's saying. And so the one that's on the downside, right? She's saying that this was to him, right? Hearing this was to him the Bach and the blues, right? So what does that mean? It means that was the foundation of Edward Payne's invented piano playing. That was not just this, but that also, right? The tilting, the head tilting to the left a little bit. That should be the answer. All right. It took us a little bit more than that, but in reality, right? If I wasn't explaining anything, if I was just trying to look at these things, right? Just compare the answers to the actual lines. It shouldn't take me that long, right? Probably a minute or a minute and a half in this case. Let's go to number 8. According to the passage, when Edward Payne first played Sonny Boy Blue straight through, he did so how, right? You've read this already. This should take you 20 seconds, more slowly than was intended by the composer after it had been suggested by Abe Kaiser against the wishes of the bassist and drummer without following the original tune. How did he do it? How did he do it? Now, this shouldn't be right because he did actually follow the original tune, right? Probably, so not it. Against the wishes of bassist and drummer, no, they conferred with them. And then after it had been suggested by Abe Kaiser, I don't think so. Now, this should be your answer, and without a doubt, this should be, you should choose this as an answer. Although we haven't read that, we know that he was playing it like as if it's original, right? Because that's the answer. Now, of course, if you want to check that answer, let's see where you should go, right? You should go right here. Edward Payne took his time, we read this, right? Paying his respects to the tune as written, and once was done, he hunched closer to the piano, angled his head. I'm sorry, this is that part where it says, he was doing that. I think we need to go back one more, right? Right here. At first, hawky though it was, he played the song straight through as written, and the rather long introduction, verses and chorus. So what does that tell us? He was actually playing it very long, right? He was playing it as slowly as he can, right? So that's the answer. You get the answer right away because we read that part because I remember reading that part of it, right? I'm hoping that you also do remember reading that part of it, all right? All right, this one. So number 9, the same thing, right? For about a minute. According to the passage, Haiti speculated that the source of Edward Payne's musical ideas and feeling during Sonny Boy Blue was in what? In the way he tilted his head, right? She says that that's the source of his, or the foundation of his creative play, right? It's not that simple-mindedness of the song, or it's the ability to play with great formality, or his connection with the silent audiences. None of that, right? Okay. Number 10, same thing. The narrator states that to Haiti, Edward Payne's performance was what? Was it overly slow and formal, deliberate yet absent-minded, like a song played in a church, or a roller coaster of the ride? Definitely the answer is the roller coaster of the ride, because, of course, it says, I don't know if you remember this, but we read that, right? We read that part where it says he was taking them again and again. He took them on a joyous, terrifying roller coaster of a ride. That's what the narrator is, comparing his music to. You see how all the information of the questions that we were asked are found within whatever we've read, right? Now, this should have taken you less than 8.5 minutes to solve, all right? Remember, 8.5 minutes to solve. And I'm pretty sure we did because we did about 2 minutes of reading, or 2.5 minutes of reading, right? And then number 1 to 10, we spent about average of about 45 seconds, I'm pretty sure, right? I think we did. I mean, it could be more or it could be less, but it's about, right, 45 seconds or less than 45 seconds, right? Because if it's a minute, then we should have spent 10 minutes here, and that's 12.5 minutes, that's over, right? But if we spent about 45 or 40 minutes, I'm pretty sure that's average time we spent on each of the questions, because some of the questions, remember, some of the questions like this one, or some of the questions like this one, right? Or some of the questions like this one, we've already solved this or established it in about 20 seconds time, right? This was about 20 seconds of time, right? And this was probably, this took probably 1.5 minutes or 1 minute at a time at best. This one probably 20 seconds, right? Or less than 20 seconds. And all of it, right? All of it 20 seconds or less, right? So it will, I mean, average, I gave it too generous, right? I'm sure average should be not 45, but about 30 seconds in time, right? So therefore, that's 5 minutes. So 7.5 minutes, or overall 8.5 minutes was reached, right? You see that how it works? Some of the questions took you more than a minute, but most of the questions took you like less than 20 seconds to solve. I mean, I'm serious about this. The way you read it, the way you understand it, by connecting the ideas with the passages would be very important for you to do, all right? So please remember, right? Time criticalness is very important, all right? And the orderliness is important as well. And accurateness is very important, all right? If you have a minute left, what you want to do is you want to go back and try to check if that's the answer, right? You chose your answer already, but you want to go back and check your answer as we are doing right now, okay? So remember that. All right, let's move on to the second, which is the social science, which could be a little more difficult.